Sinclair sat frozen, eyes wide, as a gust of wind swept the white cloak from her body. She couldn't move. Her mind refused to accept what she had just seen. At first, it felt like a strange dream, something impossible, something that couldn't exist in the real world. But the scene kept replaying in her head, over and over. The monstrous boar-headed creature fighting the Night Hound, and President Dolores was burned into her memory. She saw it push itself beyond its limits, facing down the overwhelming power of the Night Hound. Then, with its strength finally spent, the creature shifted back into a man. Before Sinclair could even process the transformation, the Night Hound swung his blade without hesitation, and in one stroke, the man's head was severed. The head rolled across the floor and stopped near Sinclair's feet. Blood spread across the ground, refusing to stay hidden. In that horrifying moment, the ugly truth finally hit her. This wasn't a dream. This was real. And this world did not hold back. Vikir and Dolores noticed Sinclair standing there, both freezing in shock. Dolores couldn't understand how Sinclair had appeared. She had made sure Sinclair drank the drugged tea and fell asleep. She'd thought one cup would solve everything. She had even arranged for Piggy to safely escort Sinclair back to the academy. Sinclair remained calm on the outside, but inside, confusion, anger, and betrayal clashed like an uncontrollable storm. Her cold expression made one thing clear. She was done being kept in the dark. She wanted the truth. Questions flooded her mind. Why was Dolores standing next to the Night Hound? Why had the Night Hound killed the patriarch of the bourgeois family like it was nothing more than a crossed-out task? Her trust in Dolores began to crack, frustration rising. She lifted her hands to cover her face as despair sank in. Dolores rushed toward her, worry and urgency written all over her face, like someone realizing the bill had arrived, and it was far higher than expected. She tried to get Sinclair to focus, hoping to calm her before things spiraled out of control. Desperately, she explained that the man who died wasn't truly human, but a demon who had harmed innocent people. But Sinclair pulled away, rejecting her touch. She wasn't buying it. Her reaction was so cold the air felt heavier. And in that moment, Dolores realized Sinclair was no longer someone who would blindly believe her. Vikir watched the tension carefully, reading the room like a seasoned strategist. He understood how dangerous this moment had become. Time was running out. The safe door would open soon, and once it did, everything would be exposed to the outside world. He told Dolores they needed to leave. Now. Dolores urged Sinclair to come with them for her own safety, insisting she'd be in serious danger if she stayed behind. But Sinclair pushed back, pointing out the obvious truth Dolores seemed to be ignoring, that she herself was standing in the middle of the greatest danger of all. Sinclair's mind started drifting toward exposing everything she'd just witnessed, like breaking news, waiting to detonate. Then, at that exact moment, Vikir stepped forward. He took full responsibility for the assassination, throwing himself under the bus like a tragic hero who already knew how this story would end. He chose to protect Dolores by confessing that he alone had killed the patriarch. The official story would paint her as an innocent hostage, someone who knew nothing, saw nothing, and was merely caught in the crossfire. Sinclair's fury ignited, and she activated her power without hesitation, a clear warning that she would stop him if necessary. Her voice cut through the heavy air as she challenged him directly. If she tried to stop him, would he kill her too? Her resolve hardened, refusing to let him escape without consequences. Vikir studied her carefully, his mind reaching back through the knowledge of his past life before regression. He remembered Sinclair, a genius, an elite who had graduated from the academy with flying colors. Then, mysteriously, she had vanished from history without a trace, like a viral post suddenly deleted from the internet. The memory planted a seed of uncertainty in his mind. But now, standing face to face with her, other memories surfaced, ones from their time at the academy. Her bright smile whenever she saw him, the way she was always direct, always pushing to get closer, refusing to let their age difference matter. Though she was a year younger, she insisted on speaking with him as an equal. And then there was that moment, when Vikir had been locked in the safe, and after he finally got out, Sinclair was the first person to run toward him. She had burst into tears, terrified that he would never come back. The memories tangled with his calculations. He began questioning whether allowing her to live would create future problems, whether she might interfere with his goals. For a brief, chilling moment, he considered the possibility of killing her, removing the threat before it could take root. Dolores noticed his clenched fist. She sensed the dangerous turn his thoughts had taken. The tension sharpened, and the atmosphere grew thick with silence and fear, pressing down on all of them like a held breath before a storm. The sudden entry of several men through the open door immediately shifted the atmosphere within the room. One of them, recognizing the infamous Night Hound, reacted with visible shock and confusion, demanding to know why he was present. Another voice quickly followed, inquiring about the Patriarch's whereabouts. The confusion only deepened with the arrival of Damien, whose shouted question about the unfolding events drew bewildered looks from the guards, who wondered aloud why he was there. Surveying the horrific scene before him, Damien's gaze fell upon the severed head of the Patriarch, making the grim reality of an assassination undeniable. In an instant, he seized command of the situation. Forcing down the lump in his throat, Damien raised a single finger, pointing accusingly at the Night Hound as he declared the event an assassination. He proclaimed that the Night Hound had murdered the Patriarch and taken the Saintess hostage. With urgency, he ordered the men to summon more guards, to rescue the Saintess, and to capture the assassin. Damien's quick thinking mirrored the conclusions Vikir had drawn moments earlier. His decisive orders immediately recast the narrative, establishing an official account of the night's events. Recognizing that remaining would only entangle him further in a rapidly deteriorating situation, Vikir prepared to flee. Before he could disappear, however, Sinclair blocked his path, a mana-infused magic circle rising around her as she refused to let him vanish so easily. Vikir cast one final glance back at her, silently conceding that she alone must reconcile her beliefs with the evidence she had witnessed. Before any further action could be taken, Vikir raised his Beelzebub swords, triggering a massive explosion that sent chaos and destruction rippling through the safe. Sinclair instinctively shielded herself, covering her face from the blast. In the ensuing confusion, Vikir vanished alongside Dolores, leaving only devastation and unanswered questions in their wake. Damien quickly regained his composure and barked orders for everyone to secure the exits, determined to prevent the Night Hound from escaping. Yet the assassin had already disappeared without leaving a single trace behind. As guards scrambled to check the exit door, Sinclair remained rooted in place, muttering to herself before her hand clenched into a fist. Damien approached her, carefully observing her condition. From what the head butler had relayed, all other students had already returned to the academy. The Night Hound had not disclosed which students were meant to visit the Patriarch, but Damien dismissed this as a matter beyond his concern. Positioning himself behind Sinclair, he informed her that the vault would soon be sealed, and that guards were waiting outside to escort her back. Meanwhile, Sinclair quietly processed everything in her mind. Disregarding what Damien had said to her, she turned away and walked toward the vault's exit, her expression empty and unreadable. Damien turned his head slightly, wondering to himself whether Sinclair was traumatized. It was a distinct possibility, considering she had just witnessed the Patriarch's assassination. Left alone with Bartolomeo's lifeless remains, Damien leaned down and reflected on the weight of the moment. He remembered Bartolomeo as a powerful man who had once stood at the very top of the world, someone who looked down upon everyone else. Now, that same man lay dead on the ground, stripped of both his authority and his humanity. Damien began to question the nature of the person before him. What lay there was no longer human. The safe, reinforced with mithril and orichalcum, and designed to withstand any power within this world, had been utterly destroyed. He recalled what the Night Hound had told him, that Bartolomeo was a demon possessing absolute power. He wondered now if Bartolomeo had truly wielded the power of a demon. Just as Damien believed he was piecing everything together, Sinclair suddenly returned and confronted him with a shocking accusation. She concluded that Damien himself was the one who had brought the Night Hound and Dolores into the safe to assassinate the Patriarch. Her calm yet intense presence unsettled Damien deeply. He prepared himself for combat, unsheathing his swords and pointing them at Sinclair, confused and alarmed by her unexpected claim. However, as he looked closely at her face, he became overwhelmed by a strange sense of familiarity. For a brief moment, he believed he was seeing Juliet, his daughter. But he quickly realized that this was not Juliet, even though her features bore a striking resemblance. The girl standing before him was Sinclair Bourgeois, the only daughter of his brother. Sinclair stood firmly in front of Damien, her eyes cold and unwavering as she repeated her accusation. She believed that he was the one responsible for bringing the Night Hound and the Saintess into the safe. For a moment, Damien simply stood there, frozen in place. He then slowly lowered his sword, choosing peace over confrontation. Without meeting her gaze, he calmly explained that everything was a misunderstanding and began presenting a reasonable defense. He revealed that the imperial capital was currently suffering from severe inflation caused by the circulation of fake notes and counterfeit gold. Because of this crisis, he claimed that he had visited his brother to discuss urgent financial matters that affected the entire empire. He carefully controlled his tone and behavior, making sure not to provoke further suspicion. Inside his mind, Damien acknowledged Sinclair's sharp instincts. He realized that although her accusation lacked proof, her intuition was dangerously accurate. At this rate, she could probably accuse him of crimes he had not yet committed and still somehow be right. Sinclair listened to his explanation, but quickly realized that the truth behind his visit was not what mattered most to her right now. She walked past Damien and stood in front of her father's lifeless body. For a brief moment, Piggy's question resurfaced in the back of her mind. He had once asked her what kind of questions she would ask the Patriarch when she finally met him. At the time, she hadn't known how to answer. Now she softly murmured that there was one thing she had wanted to ask her father once she met him. Her eyes grew distant and lifeless as she realized she would never get the chance. Quietly, she asked why her father had abandoned her. Damien heard the question and turned to face her. He told her that his own daughter, Juliet, had asked him the very same thing, back when he had thrown her into society with nothing but the identity of a commoner. Sinclair turned to her uncle with a sorrowful gaze. She hadn't known that Juliet had suffered the same fate as her. For a brief moment, Damien saw his daughter's resemblance in Sinclair's face. He gritted his teeth in frustration and looked down at his feet before answering. To put it simply, he said, his brother and the family had not abandoned them. Esse non videri, the creed of existing without exposing oneself. He explained that it was tradition in the bourgeois family for an heir to prove their qualifications as a leader by succeeding in the imperial capital without any help from their parents. Clenching his fist, Damien looked Sinclair directly in the eye and said she should have known about this rule long before now. He couldn't understand why Bartolomeo had never told her any of it. A sudden clarity formed in her mind as she recalled one encounter with her father, and she found herself questioning whether the person who had thrown her away wasn't her father at all, but a demon. The father, she remembered, was a demon. She dismissed the idea. It couldn't be true. There was no such thing as a demon. She wondered if everything she had seen and heard had been mere hallucination. But the doubt kept gnawing at her as she pictured her father's purple, glowing eyes. She no longer knew what was true and what wasn't. The one thing she was certain of was that the Night Hound knew. Vikir's words played in her mind, that she should decide what she believed based only on what she had seen and heard with her own eyes. She needed to see him again. Sinclair turned away from her father's decapitated head, bidding it a silent farewell, and began to walk past her uncle, her gaze steely. Before she left, Damien told her that he would now take over the family. Outside the bourgeois family's estate, Vikir remained hidden as the guards below barked orders, stating that they should search every nook and cranny. The Night Hound shouldn't have been able to leave the territory yet, and they couldn't let him get away. Crouching atop the castle walls, hidden from the guards, Vikir noted to Dolores that the more time passed, the stricter the security grew. Dolores, however, hugged her knees closer to her chest, her mind drifting away from the chaos below. She murmured that it still bothered her. Was it really the right choice to leave Sinclair behind? Hearing her question, Vikir turned his gaze away from the guards and looked at her. He replied that if she was worried about her safety, there was no need. It was highly unlikely she would be deemed an accomplice just for having been at the scene. Damien had specifically told the guards that he alone was behind this, that the Night Hound had taken the Saintess hostage and assassinated the Patriarch. Dolores looked up at Vikir, listening to his reassuring words. He went on to say that Sinclair was smart and wouldn't talk about them, and even if she did tell others what had happened inside the safe, they would only think she had gone mad. Then Dolores, her voice turning cold, replied that the only wicked person left who connected Quo Vadis and the bourgeois patriarch was Humbert. She remembered, too, that Cardinal Humbert had just paid her a visit. He was the only one remaining. Her body began to tremble at the thought that she should probably go see him and ask what had happened with Belial. Vikir watched Dolores tremble, studying her, and asked whether she was afraid of her father. Unable to meet Vikir's lingering gaze, Dolores paused for a moment, hugging her knees even tighter. With a sorrowful expression, she replied that it was almost laughable. She had overcome her fear of the demon Belial, had even awakened, and yet she was still afraid of her own father. Vikir leaned back against the stone wall of the castle and told her there was nothing laughable about what she'd just said. His words made Dolores' heart skip a beat. The bridge of her nose turned red as her eyes grew watery. Looking away from Vikir, Dolores wiped away her tears and asked if he wouldn't mind listening to her story. He would be the first person she'd ever shared it with. It wasn't something she could tell others. No one else would understand. She knew the Night Hound had likely already figured out that Humbert wasn't her biological father. When Dolores was a baby, she had caught his eye with her innate divine power, and she had grown up as his adopted daughter ever since. Cardinal Humbert came from one of the most influential families in the imperial capital. He was the most powerful person there aside from the Pope himself, respected by countless people. In front of such a perfect man, Dolores had needed to be obedient at all times. A pretty puppet who never complained, never defied him. If she ever tried to escape his control, he would. The words died in her throat. Her tears began to flow again, but she said that everything was all right now because she had met the Night Hound. Under the crescent moon sky, Dolores smiled genuinely for the first time, because now, at last, she had the courage to escape his oppression. Vikir was left speechless, his eyes widening in surprise. Though they had grown up in different environments, her life was not so different from his own when he had been a bloodhound before his regression, a time when he had had no reason to live other than to follow orders. She, too, was living a chained existence. With firm resolution, Vikir vowed that he needed to see Humbert in order to put an end to their twisted relationship. Meanwhile, elsewhere in the capital, a broken carriage lay wrecked, its wheels flung aside, and the ground spilled with blood. The horse that had been pulling the carriage lay lifeless. A man was running, fleeing from the scene. With each step he took, blood spat from his mouth. It was none other than Cardinal Humbert. Blood trickled down from his forehead to his cheeks as he panted heavily and continued to run for his life, shouting in desperation that he had not known, that he truly had not known. With the death of the cult leaders, the crimes connecting him to the Old Testament faction and the bourgeois family had come to light. If the royal family investigated, the cardinal feared he would be forced to take the blame for everything. He recalled the conversation he'd once had with Bartolomeo, how he had threatened to expose everything if he were ever arrested. But Bartolomeo had only met the threat with a wide grin, and the cardinal had known then that it was useless. He knew Bartolomeo was not human. He was, without a doubt, a demon. The moment Cardinal Humbert had realized this, fear gripped his very soul. He had fallen from his chair, apologizing to the demon, pleading for his life to be spared. At that moment, Bartolomeo had clenched his fist, a dark aura swirling around it. Coldly, he remarked that if the time ever came when the cardinal needed help, he should use this. He opened his hand, and hovering above his palm was a yellow eyeball, the ring around its iris glowing purple, marked with an X at its center. Frightened, Cardinal Humbert had reached out, not daring to face the demon's wrath, and the strange gift floated into his hand. By accepting the demon's gift, he had been allowed to leave alive. Now, in the present, the very gift the demon had given him was still in his hand. Curling his fingers around the unknown item, the cardinal continued to run for his life, hesitant to use it. He didn't know what it would do to him, and he couldn't trust a demon. In the midst of his dilemma, a serpent-like whip whizzed through the forest trees, infused with mana, and found its target. It struck Cardinal Humbert, tearing off the hand that held the demon's gift. It happened so fast that the cardinal froze. Time slowed for him as he watched his own hand sever from his body, blood spilling out like a waterfall. His knees crumpled to the floor, blood still pouring heavily, forming a pool beneath him. He stared at his hand, his fingers stained red, and reality hit him all at once. He let out a cry, curling into a ball, weeping for his severed hand. A woman in high heels stood before him. Mockingly, she said she had only meant to steal what was in his hand. Cutting it off had simply been easier. She held the cardinal's severed hand in her own. His face crumpled in horror and disbelief as he replied that the item was his and told her not to touch it. The woman before him was none other than Miss Rachel. Under the night sky, moonlight filtered through the forest leaves and fell upon her as she stood with a menacing smile, holding up Humbert's hand as blood dripped from it. In a cold tone, she recounted his sins one by one. First, he had taken money under the table, then he had sold children, and now he was siding with a demon, and he called himself a clergyman. Miss Rachel's lips curled into a blade-thin smile as she surveyed the crumpled wreck of the so-called cardinal. A pathetic shit-show of a man, she purred, her voice dripping with venom. But no, not all was lost. She was, after all, merely a collector of filth, and he was just another stain to be scraped from the world. The cardinal ground his teeth until they nearly cracked, the bitter taste of her words choking him more than any noose could. He mumbled something, a plea, a curse, a prayer, it didn't matter which. She couldn't hear him over the drum of her own pulse. She leaned in, mockingly sweet, demanding he repeat himself. His eyes lifted to hers, swimming in regret and something darker, rawer, remorse that had come too late. But before his tongue could form another worthless syllable, her whip coiled around his throat like a serpent's kiss and yanked him off his feet, slamming him against the gnarled branch of a nearby tree. He dangled there, a broken puppet twisting in the wind, his hands clawing at the leather coiled around his throat, his legs kicking at empty air. Miss Rachel took her time approaching, each step a slow, deliberate burial of his hope. She told him not to fret. She would teach him too. They would go back together, she said, back to when the world made sense. The cardinal gasped, his vision swimming in a red haze, tears bleeding from his bloodshot eyes as he choked out a single shattered question. What old era was she talking about? Miss Rachel's visor glowed with a violet malignancy, twin pools of predatory light. Her tongue slithered out, wet and eager, as she drew the severed hand close to her lips, salivating like a beast over carrion. She leaned in, her breath cold against his ear, and told him, the Warring States period. Back when the strong didn't just win, they devoured. If you're enjoying this series, please give the video a like. It really helps others discover it. And if you'd like to see more, consider subscribing to the channel. Want the next chapter? Comment next chapter below.